The question is, why does gold have value? So I'm going to go ahead and answer this, and hopefully I have enough time to pull this off. I realize most people don't have the attention span for any of this, so just scroll past it if you have the attention span of a goldfish, because this ain't going to be the video for you. By virtue of the price paid that it takes to pull gold out of the ground, in other words, whether it's a guy with a pick and a shovel, or a giant, ore hauler, or some such thing, it doesn't matter. It's going to take an enormous amount of energy to pull gold out of the ground. You have to expend energy to pull it out of the ground. That's the first piece of it. But the rest of the story goes like this. Because it's a base element, what is a base element? For those of you who don't know, it means that it's one of those elements that you can't use other elements to create. It is its own element unto itself. Right? Just like silver and all the other elements on the periodic table, they are a base element. Gold doesn't have any particular, it has a very limited commercial use, but it's not as broad as silver. Silver's in absolutely everything, or so it seems. But gold doesn't really have a ton of commercial use except for extremely limited applications. So you have this metal, and what do you do with it? And it's fairly rare. There's a scarcity involved there, so that's good. It's more scarce than iron ore, for example. Iron ore is, another one, but there's a lot of it. So it's kind of like, well, it's not really going to work as well to try and transport large amounts of wealth, or even a small amount of wealth. Whereas with gold, though, you can transport quite a bit. Now, why was gold chosen? Gold was chosen because it was fairly malleable, and it didn't really have any other purpose. But because it was a base metal, it couldn't be counterfeited, right? So you can counterfeit other things, particularly paper dollars. You can counterfeit those all day long. You just have to have the same technology that somebody else has, and then you can print as much as you want. And it costs, 9.3 cents to print $100 bill. So, I mean, and that's measured by using their own numbers. It's probably not even that. So, because it couldn't be counterfeited, and because of the relative idea of scarcity, it was thought of as a good idea to be used as a monetary unit of measurement. Now, you have to think like a merchant or a business owner, right? And most people don't think like this because most everybody has a job mentality. They've been trained to go work in somebody else's organization, not be their own organization. When you're your own organization, then you have to think like this. But if you're going to work in somebody else's organization, you can just take your brain out and just, you show up and do whatever it is, tasks that they tell you to do. Whether it's answer this email, do this Zoom meeting, flip this burger, or empty that container or whatever. It doesn't make any difference, okay? You don't have to do any more thinking for yourself. Most people in general aren't really in charge of anything in a lot of jobs that they do because of this. Now, for those of you that don't know, I'm in charge of all kinds of stuff. No, you're not. No, you're not. I would argue that, okay, because unless you can start actually making genuine changes, then you're not in charge of shit, right? Just like the people out there say, well, I approve this deal or approve that deal. Like, did you have to, okay, what are the algorithms? Did you have to go and ask permission from somebody else for that? Or did you just act unilaterally? Because most people don't act unilaterally. Most people, if they work at a company and they start acting unilaterally, they'll be fired very quickly. Because the companies, most of them have protocols. Because you're just somebody there to help them be profitable. You're not there to try and think for yourself, right? That's how most companies operate. Sad, but true. And even the people who think they actually have authority, it's only authority to a certain point. You don't have unlimited authority. You just have a certain point of authority that you're able to move around within. That's it, which means that, once again, they've given you a very specific set of parameters to work within. And that is, by the way, how most people think. So when you take yourself out of that, right, then you realize you not only have no ceiling, but you also have no floor either, meaning that you just exist in sort of three-dimensional space. And now you have to really think things through. So then the first thing that you're going to look for is some way to ground your business, your idea, your existence, right? Well, when you look for that idea, then you have to try and find something. You go to base elements, right? Okay, so again, we're talking about like going back into hallowed antiquity. We're not talking about right at this very second. I have to bring you up to speed kind of slowly, okay? So you start looking for because you're tired of getting ripped off. Because see, if you're just waiting for everybody else to keep their word, that's not going to happen. If you're waiting for, it's just like you guys who think you're going to vote your way out of this. Dude, come on. You're waiting for everybody else to keep their word on everything. Well, gold, because this is the topic of conversation, had this other property in that it had a specific gravity and a specific displacement, and so it either weighs or it doesn't. It's either pure or it's not, and you either have it or you don't. That's it. That's it. That's the property right there. And that by itself gives it an enormous amount of value because of that. Not because of what's called intrinsic value. We're not using intrinsic value. I'm not going to use that word here for this, other than for just me explaining the intrinsic aspect. It's because it can't be counterfeited. You understand? So someone can't phone it in. They can't say, "Oh yeah, hey, we'll pay you." No. Do you have the gold? I want to see it. Okay? Because remember, it's either weighs or it doesn't. It's pure or it's not. You either have it or don't. That's it. And that's how you start to think. And see, when you start to think along those lines as a merchant, put yourself in a merchant position. Put yourself in the business position. You can't trust anybody because you just can't. You can't really trust what they're saying, and especially since 99% of people probably out there are full of shit, and they don't even know it. Think of how many people out there have managed to lie to themselves. I mean, forget lying to other people. Forget that. I've said this for a long time ago. Forget lying to other people, dude. If you've lied to yourself, you are unsalvageable. And think of how many people have lied to themselves to such a degree, and they won't question themselves, which is the nascent beginning of a religion. So they won't question any of this stuff. So now you have to have something grounded, right? So if you're going to be a shrewd businessman, okay, or woman, doesn't matter, then you have to actually say, okay, hold on. You're going to have to deal with me on something that you're not going to just conjure this out of nothing, because I'm not going to expend my energy, which is finite, which is true. Okay, because you are a finite being, whatever it is, whether it's 1 day or 10,000 years, doesn't matter. You are a finite being. So because of the finite nature of your existence, you have to have something of like kind. Okay. So because of its relative scarcity, and because by virtue of the price paid to pull it out of the ground, which requires enormous amounts of energy. You could say, look, well, labor, yes, or energy. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. I mean, you don't get around laws of physics. It takes enormous amount. You're like, well, but we could build a big ore hauler and a big excavator and stuff. Yes, you still have to build the big excavator. You still have to build the big ore haulers. You still have to build all that stuff, and that takes an enormous amount of energy. Well, but then we make more money off of it and everything. To the extent that entropy doesn't take its toll on that equipment, because that equipment breaks down, needs to be fixed, and so on. So to that extent, yeah. But keep in mind, that's all going to be factored in to your cost of pulling that out of the ground, right? That's how that works. Whether it's a giant excavator or a guy with a pick and a shovel, it's still relative to the amount of energy that you're putting forth. You still have to put forth energy. Doesn't make any difference whether it's but we could run it on diesel. Yes, you still have to have guys go out and they have to get oil and pull it out of the ground, and then they got to take it to a facility, a refinery, where they put it into a cracking tower, and they have to make diesel. You see what I'm saying? And then you have to move all this stuff around. There is an enormous amount of energy you do not get out of this. You do not, in fact, actually it costs you more energy generally than what you get back. That's part of entropy. Okay, so because of that, that's where gold gets its actual value from a merchant standpoint, is that you're able to call bullshit on anybody who says that they're going to be able to perform for you somehow, and they don't have any way to actually perform. I hope that made sense.